Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar, Why Diversity Continues to be a Challenge and How to Actually Start Solving the Problem. My name is Devin McDonald, and I'm a partner here at OpenView. For those of you who might not know, OpenView is a venture capital firm. We are based in Boston, and we invest exclusively in expansion stage B2B software companies. Here at OpenView, we definitely have a unique model for VC. We have an entire team of full-time employees that work with our portfolio companies post-investment to help them with customer and talent acquisition strategies, which are ultimately two of the biggest focal points for expansion stage companies. We produce daily content and we host numerous events each month, much like this webinar, that are really all geared towards helping our portfolio and the broader tech community solve their biggest business challenges. You can find out more about OpenView at openviewpartners.com. So a few housekeeping items before we begin. There will be a Q&A at the end of the webinar today. As questions come up, however, please use the chat feature on the left side of your screen, and we will try to get to as many questions and get them answered as we possibly can. We are also going to be sending out the deck and the recording from today's webinar post-webinar, so keep an eye out for that. So today's discussion is really centered all around one of the most prevalent and sensitive topics out there across industries really, and that's the gender diversity gap. Particularly for today's conversation, we're focusing on enterprise software and also at the leadership level. But what we want to do is not just talk about it. We actually want to talk about strategies that are going to help you solve the issue of the lack of diversity within your company, and to also discuss strategies that are going to help you make a change for the better. So joining me today for our discussion, we have Coco Brown, who is the CEO and founder of the Athena Alliance, and Zach Rosen, who is the CEO of Pantheon, one of our portfolio companies. Welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Great to have you today, both of you. Thank you so much for joining. So, Coco, I'm going to start off, and I would love to ask you, can you tell us a little about the Athena Alliance?
Yes. You'll see my first slide I love to show here. That little girl there, that's me. Since you can't see my face, I'm going to claim that that's me. We all know that's not. But that's how I feel.
You've aged very, very well, Coco. You have to share your secrets with me.
Yes, right. So as Devin said, I'm the founder and CEO of Athena Alliance. And today we're an organization working to what we see as the last mile challenges to getting women into the boardroom. But really, it's much, much bigger than that. The reality that struck me that had us doing this is this picture here. I was a woman who was successfully running a technology company and leadership of that technology company. And having been in that role, I didn't quite realize how few women really were in roles at the top until I started really digging in and learning more. And this truly is what the most diverse leadership teams in the U.S. look like today. On average across all of corporate America, women hold just 17% of C-suite roles. And even more sort of striking is that while we hold 23% of board seats in public companies with market caps over $100 billion, we only hold 9% in those with market caps of $100 million to $500 million. And when you think about expansion stage SaaS companies, it's even a much bigger challenge. So today, our vision is of a world where women can contribute at their highest level of impact, ensuring we all benefit from the indisputable value of diversity in leadership. But our mission today is to accelerate gender parity in the boardroom, and specifically because we feel you have to solve the problems at the top if you want to be able to create systemic change throughout. We're a 501c3 nonprofit, founded just 2 years ago. We have supported 13 board placements so far. We have over 1,000 women and top executive men in our network, and have raised over $1.3 million to date to support our efforts. You can see that this is our board here. You can see we have the reverse problem. While we have one woman on our board, we have no people of color on our board yet, and we have one man. So we strive to be the change we wish to see, and be adding several board members this year with an emphasis on men. Our impact greatly increased the visibility of top women. So we've had 226 presentations of women to boards in the last year with 90 interviews and on to multiple more than that and 13 wins. And just to kind of close out that background on us, this is the 13 wins I'm mentioning. 7 of them are public companies and the rest private companies. So I think it's back to you.
All right, excellent. So thanks for the intro, Coco. Very interesting, Athena Alliance, how you're structured. And I happen to say I noticed the male board member you have. He looks really familiar. I swear I've seen him before.
Yes, I should mention that our male board director is the senior founding partner of OpenView Venture Partners. And I think Devin will speak about this a little bit more later, but OpenView has become a very strategic partner to the Athena Alliance, so much so that we roped Scott in as one of our board members, but also just a really intimate part of my own thinking process around how to address the changes that we need to address and how to really engage men and men with strong power and leadership to help in the effort. So we're very excited to have him as part of our organization.
Well, I would say you hardly had to rope him in because this is something that's very near and dear to his heart, and I'll speak to this later. But he's very passionate about the topic of diversity in technology and venture capital, and I think he was extremely thrilled to have you invite him to join your board. So I'm going to rattle off a few stats for you here. Earlier this year, OpenView surveyed 300 enterprise software companies from pre-revenue all the way through 20 million ARR. And 3 things came out in this survey that I want to call out. 71% had no women on their board. Only 4% had parity between men and women on their board, 4%. And only 12% had parity between men and women in leadership roles. So leadership roles being, VP level or higher. Do those stats surprise you? And my question really is, why is this happening? Why is this happening historically, and why does it sort of persist today?
Yeah. There was a time when those stats would have surprised me. They don't surprise me at all at this point because I've just so immersed myself in what is going on out there. And I would say, this slide here I want to share with you is one of the reasons that we find ourselves where we are, which is to say that the issue generally at large for corporate America is that women don't advance up the career ladder. We fall off at literally every promotional rung. And so by the time we get to the top, there are fewer of us. And so the question is, why, right? The main reasons, there's several, but the main reasons is there is an unconscious bias on both sides. So society believes that women don't want to advance and that men need for advancement. And women also have built-in beliefs that supported in advancement that they don't yet have the qualifications required. So we sort of both work against this interest. By way of example, countless studies now show that men likely to be suited for when they meet some requirements of the role, whereas women are more likely to not yet suited for the role unless they meet all of the requirements for the role, and that holds women back from advancement. And likewise, women are less likely to really put themselves forward for advancement, waiting to recognize a job well done, whereas men are much more accustomed to requesting advancement. But then the question is, in younger companies, why does it persist still in the younger companies? Is the issue is that predominantly surrounded, or young companies are predominantly surrounded early on by mostly men because historically, particularly in the space where OpenView plays, which is SaaS enterprise software, historically those companies are founded by men. And regardless of industry, though, the funders of companies, investors, have been almost exclusively men. And naturally, these men funding businesses themselves have had very successful careers, and they're very successful in founding and building to great exits. And they surround themselves with others like them, which naturally, historically, has been men. So if we wait for this to turn on its own and for women to sort of come into their own, and we are seeing more women doing, sort of jumping into CEO roles, but it's going to take time, and it can take 50 or more years. So that's really, there are enlightened CEOs, and I think there's a lot of effort going on to help us move the needle faster. But we really have to make the efforts to try to bring more top women into the boardroom to help. Women are more likely, if they are in the boardroom, to bring others into the boardroom, because just like great men, we surround ourselves with great women as well. I hope I didn't go on too long.
No, that makes total sense. So, obviously I think you mentioned women being in leadership roles are able to attract women in the more junior roles into the business. Beyond that, why does diversity in leadership matter? And not just in the studies, but from your own experience? Because I think that's the question. I think everyone's saying, okay, there is a lack of diversity, sure. But let's talk explicitly about the advantages of having diversity.
Yeah. Well, okay, so when I think about it, there's really, if you want to benefit from the dividends of diversity that the studies talk about, which is greater revenues, increased longevity, better profitability, et cetera, what you really want to focus on is relational diversity and cognitive diversity. And so what I mean by that is, when you can relate deeply to your customer, your community, the individual buying or using your products and services, you can deliver better to them. So that's a benefit of diversity that sort of just makes sense. And cognitive diversity is really if you can bring different ways of looking at a problem or looking at an opportunity that comes through different life experiences and sort of cultural experiences, you will be better. So that's kind of the why behind diversity. And so gender, race, religion, age, disability, these are just different backgrounds with norms and experiences that are different that can contribute to relational and cognitive diversity. And the reason we focus on gender first is because women are 47.6% of, now 45% of the breadwinners. So we really have to focus there first. As to the studies, there have been many validated studies around this, from the World Economic Forum to State Street and Morgan Stanley and JP Morgan. And those institutions are demanding change because they realize that those kinds of relational diversity and cognitive diversity are really a today's world. And I think I answered your question, yes?
Yeah, no, you definitely did. So I guess I know, Zach, I feel like we've kind of left you out of the conversation so far. I want to allow you to give your 2 cents on the topic and, the benefits in your opinion. What do you think those are, and what have you seen within your organization?
Yeah, I mean, first of all, I'm a huge believer that diverse companies simply outcompete monocultures. There's plenty of research and evidence on this, and just from my personal experience, when you have a lot of the same people in the room, you'll get a lot of the same ideas. And the best, in my personal experience, you get the best outcomes when you attack problems from all sorts of different angles. Diversity it's a competitive advantage. So I believe that, and I being in kind of in the thick of a expansion stage startup, we hit about 100 employees that mark when I met Coco at an OpenView event, I think about a year ago, and I've been thinking a lot about it. And I think that the challenge, especially at expansion stage companies, is you really do wear blinders. Like there's a ton of in the early stages of building a company, there's just a lot of risk. Does the product work? Are the customers going to like it? Can I sell it in a repeatable way? Can I meet the high bar expectations of the investors? And I think when there's and at the same time, for good reason, I think entrepreneurs are trained for good reason to really wear blinders, to really focus in on only the things that are going to lead them through that and get them on a path to success. And I think at that stage, a couple things happen. One is when you are wearing these blinders and there's all this risk, I think that really ups the ante of unconscious bias. This is kind of my experience. And I think you can easily say, yeah, diversity is a problem at my company, but I have bigger problems on my plate right now. It's really easy to do that. And I think that the challenge for building and this is true of building any company, is properly weighing all of these competing priorities. And the issue of the diversity is that it's one of these like long-term risk and long-term opportunities. And if you're always fighting the kind of short-term battles, then you can end up losing the big important long-term things. So we at Pantheon have average diversity numbers, which is another way of saying they're terrible. They're the numbers you see in the presentation. And I've known that. We've all known that. And I at some point, you just have to work to solve it. I think like any problem you see at a company that you have to work through, you start at the beginning and you learn and you break it into smaller chunks and you kind of get on the path. And so that's been the journey for us this past year.
Well, I appreciate your humbleness, and you're certainly not alone there. And I think one of the most incredible things is that you're open to talking about it. And I think by talking about it and bringing awareness to it, that's the first step to obviously making a change there. So I appreciate your you're saying that out loud. And I wish more CEOs would do the same. At this point, given that you and Coco have now met and are now sort of engaged in a formal relationship where Coco is working with you to help you identify more possible female executives for your board, I'm going to let you kind of jump in together and start having an active conversation, and I'll butt out a little bit.
Yeah. Okay. And maybe sort of a good way to jump in on that is, so the foundation of is our premise is that if we want to accelerate this opportunity to bring more balance and diversity into organizations like Zacks, where they are heads down and just this incredible company, the best way for us to do that is to become an integral part of a trusted network. And so, I guess I'm curious for you, Zach, what made you decide to work with Athena? Because I have a sense that's kind of at the essence of it.
Yeah, I mean, so we are recruiting for board members, and just to show you a little behind the scenes how recruiting for independent board members works, it's not at all a science. It's very much it's much more of an art, at least from my experience. And it's a really important decision. And to do a really good job of it, you really want to meet a lot of candidates and a lot of different types of candidates to form a strong opinion about exactly what kind of experience and advice and person that can create the most value in the room. And if you're running a company, you have a lot of things going on. So to truly do it justice, honestly, the Athena Alliance has been a lifesaver. In my experience with working with your group, Coco, is a couple things. One is you have a truly amazing network that I simply would not have access to without working with you. So there are, I don't know the numbers, but every time I go to an Athena Alliance event or get introduced to somebody, it's a impressively seasoned executive at a very similar kind of company to ours, where their expertise is, if I can get it, is worth its weight in gold. So finding a collection of those people in any one place. I mean, you spend a disproportionate amount of your time in building companies just looking for talented people. It's an incredibly hard thing to do, and so finding a gold mine of talent is really remarkable. And then the other side of it is for me, it's just a no-brainer, to be honest, is getting help with an independent board search is a big deal, and usually the kind of thing that it would cost six figures, to be honest, to run a real independent board search. So to have that as a service that's offered to a company at our stage, where this is very much a priority and top of mind, and again, access to the talent pool, it's like, why would you not do it?
Right. And just sort of touching on that, it's funny, I think about my own history, and I haven't myself found a job through my resume since I was 23. And just to your point about it being such an important role, right? And it's a board seat role, it's also the executive team that you're with, how critical that team is at the expansion stage of the organization. Every single player counts. And my network has always gotten me my jobs, and my network has always worked for me. And I think that's no less true for successful investors and CEOs. And so what seems like, the sort of secret sauce in the art form is you take the time, Zach, in showing up in places where you feel like you're going your intimate network in powerful ways. And so, the events that you talked about and how you end up meeting people who can, whether they end up being on your board or they end up being an advisor or they end up being one of your critical teammates. But I think that's our biggest challenge, particularly at the top levels of leadership, is, it's very natural and normal from the playground on up through life that women end up sort of navigating towards women and men end up navigating towards men, and we've created that structure, and we're trying to break that down so that these two realms can come into closer proximity, because it's no longer really, even though there are fewer women in top levels of leadership, there are so many of us that there are a lot of them for the opportunities that for these expansion stage companies and for board seats. It's just a matter of bringing us together.
I totally agree, and I think just to jump in quickly on that, Coco. I think like many things in life, especially when you're building companies, so much of it is just showing up. Like it kind of is that simple, and I think making it a priority and making an effort, you can around you there are resources, including a female alliance, that are there. You just need to literally walk in the door and say hello.
And I want to, Devin, if I could sort of draw you into this part of the conversation too, because, we're talking about one CEO's approach to the strategy, and then there is an enabling function that a firm like OpenView, any venture firm could do, but others need to do more of, which is really thinking about this as something that the firm is concerned with in terms of its entire portfolio. So I guess my question would be too is, maybe you can talk a little bit about how OpenView is engaged in the challenge and how we work together from your perspective.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it goes back to my point earlier with Zach about, it needs to be talked about. It needs to sort of be front and center. And it can't just be, I use the word talk, but it should be more centered around action. And I think the best way to really prompt action is to really start tracking things. You can't really deny numbers, and you can't, by setting goals that are quantitative versus qualitative, I think that's the best way to make change here, to be honest. So for us at OpenView, and we're a very quantitative firm, as you would assume, and we've always been that way. So, taking a step back, years ago, as an example, we started blogging. And I would say we were one of the first VCs to really start producing content regularly. And Scott Maxwell, leading the charge, made it that everyone in the firm needed to write blog posts. And he wanted to track the number of blog posts that were created. And he wanted to track all activity, all traffic to the website. And he really wanted to track and measure. And I see us doing, obviously, a very different challenge now, blogging to diversity both at OpenView and within our portfolio, but we're literally tracking everything. We're tracking our own, when we have a job rec out to sort of hire for OpenView, we want to make sure that we are being inclusive, and that it's not all men that we're interviewing for the associate positions that we're hiring for, or for positions on the labs team. We're very conscious about, we want to make sure that the number of on-site interviews that we have are equal, both men and women. We're also making a commitment to, when we introduce candidates to the portfolio, really being conscious about the number of male versus female candidates that we're introducing. And quite frankly, it's a challenge, but it's a challenge that we are constantly aware of and trying to get better at. And at the end of the day, there are roles that are more challenging to be generating female candidates for. I'm just going to put it out there, right? Engineering, it's very tough. And I think right now, I'm trying to remember the last stat, what it is, but I would say it's about 30% where we're hanging out from an introduction standpoint on the female technical side. But again, we're conscious of it, and we're doing things to try to increase the number of candidates. At the board level, we're also tracking the board introductions that we're making and trying to make sure that 50% of the introductions we're making at that board level are female. And we're being very but I think that's ultimately one of the reasons why we were so committed to forming a partnership with you, Coco. And there was a point earlier last year where we weren't hitting that number. And again, we were tracking it, and we recognized we just weren't hitting the mark. So we realized we need to really be more proactive and find people that have better networks, to be honest, of female executives that we could leverage to introduce to our CEOs. So going back to your question, I think it's, for us, it's all about tracking, measuring, and constantly trying to improve the numbers.
And I'll add two stories that I think would be very good lessons for everybody on the call that sort of speak to this. One is an OpenView story. So an OpenView story, OpenView invited me to participate in the CEO forum that they hold once a year, about this time last year. And because of that, I met some 30 or so CEOs, both in the portfolio and also sort of prospective. And beyond that, Athena members were able to participate in some speed dating roundtable conversations with these CEOs. And in addition to that, some of the Athena members came to the cocktail hours that were around this event. And what that did, I think, to speak to Devin's point, is that you can have these targets and goals, but if you're not actually really taking action to open up the world, it's hard. And what they decided to do was, beyond just saying, well, introduce Casey and Devin or certain people within the firm to great, powerful women, they opened up the portfolio and said, please come in here and meet our portfolio. They sort of did it the other way around, and that really fast-tracked you, I think, to getting to a better place in terms of your numbers at the senior levels this year.
Mm-hmm.
The second story is a story of Zach in terms of how a CEO performs. We hosted an event sort of towards the end of last year for Joanne Lublin, who is the management editor of the Wall Street Journal. She essentially is one of the people who controls the front page. And we invited almost as many men to this event as we did women. And what showed up were 100 plus, I think it was 111, really senior level executives. And with the exception of 7, they were all women. and there were 7 men. They were all CEOs, including Zach. And what the value of that, Zach and I talked about this after the fact, and I said, why don't more men show up? And I think just to put, you can correct me, Zach. You said, I think they wrongly don't think this is for them, and they're really, because I just got access to all this great talent that is also serving a different need that I have, which is to go beyond my sort of core nuclear network. And so, I think putting it into action is what I see from OpenView to OpenView's portfolio CEOs. And as you say, Devin, that's driven from the top down. That originated with Scott and is clearly a part of the DNA.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's one of those things too. I mean, at the end of the day, as I said before, we're tracking it, we're measuring it. And sometimes we don't hit the goals we set forward. But what we don't do is we don't shy away as a firm from talking about where we're failing. You can't just always focus on the positive. So on a positive note, our board introductions last year, the number of female board introductions, actually, if you look across the entire universe of intros we made, 84% at that board level were female. And that's large. I mean, a lot of that's thanks to your hard work and efforts in supporting us. But we missed our sales and engineering intro number. And I hate saying that out loud because I want to see that be different. But we've got to switch up our strategy this year. And so, we had some successes, but we had some failures. And now what we're trying to do as we think forward in 2018, what are we going to do differently to try to change those numbers? And it's a work in progress. If it were as easy as, just setting a goal and then a quarter later hitting those numbers, well, great, but that's unrealistic. It's a constant, game of iteration to try to get to where we want to be.
And so maybe that's a segue into Zach in terms of sort of the long-term plan for diversity and inclusion. There's this sort of the problem that exists today and the point opportunities you're trying to address, and then there's your overarching approach. Can you speak a little bit about that?
Yeah, I'll just maybe share our journey a little bit. So I think like a lot of companies at our stage, for some time we knew we had a challenge, and it went unacknowledged and not prioritized, and it's something that just kind of bugged me a lot personally, and something I would read books and think a lot about and talk with my wife and kind of be frustrated about, but for some reason we were not taking action on it. And when I look back on that, I think it's like a lot of things in life. It's hard to admit you have a problem, especially a problem that's like core to your and personal to the company. And I think that trepidation, once we decided to first acknowledge we had a problem and that we wanted to make it a priority and we wanted to work towards a solution, all the trepidation was totally for naught. Like all my imagined fears or things that I was concerned would happen, like the exact opposite of it happened. Everyone's reaction at the company was, yes, this is something we need to work on. Yes, this is a long-term thing. No, we're not going to be able to do everything at once. It'll take us years to work towards this. We are committed to doing it. And not only that, but leaders in the company, not at the IC level, in addition to managers and executives, a lot of this has been led by mostly ICs, have really rallied around it, and they've a lot of things that are happening at the company now to prioritize this and work towards it has been this. There's been a lot of energy around it in the company that's really invigorating and really awesome to see. And I just encourage if you can get beyond that and you can get to the actually doing things, I think life gets so much easier. And absolutely, it's a really heavy lift. It's a long-term lift, and the first part of the lift is probably the heaviest part. I think this is building a diverse company is something where you really do need to get momentum. And when you have momentum, I think things do. You learn how to do it. Do get easier in some senses. but you have to start somewhere. And so yeah, that's my advice. Put the fears aside. Just admit it, and then get to the action as quickly as you can.
And just for people who don't have the shorthand there, I see they're individual contributors, and one of the things that you talk about, Zach, is tackling inclusion first. My connection was a little choppy. Did you mention that?
I didn't mention that. So it's a very good point. So something I didn't know. So what is the difference between diversity and inclusion? I might botch this, so feel free to jump in, Coco. But so diversity is literally how diverse the backgrounds of the folks are at your company. Inclusion is what is the experience of people working at your company who maybe come from a diverse background? Do they have a good experience? And the nice thing about working on inclusion is it's something you can do immediately. Right? Actually changing the diversity of your company, that will take years. That's like your recruiting pipeline and a ton of effort, and it will take years to build. But inclusion is something that you can really take a step back and in days, if not weeks, just get a good sense of how inclusive your company is to folks who work there, and then take a proactive build a proactive plan to make sure you're doing everything you can to literally include everybody at the company. And that's something we kicked off very quickly, and it's there's a lot of things in the pipeline, but it's been more straightforward and quicker to get going.
So we're almost at the end of our session here, but we did get a question in from our audience here, and the question is, how do you talk to your CEO? So if you're a member of your team, how do you talk to your CEO about the lack of diversity within your company and it being an issue? So maybe the CEO isn't actively talking about it being an issue, but you as an employee want to sort of raise it and take change. How do you approach that type of topic with leadership? Any ideas?
Yeah.
Go ahead, Coco.
Go ahead. Zach, you're the CEO, so you start. I mean, I am too. But
Look, it's a really good and fair question. And, the big fat caveat is I don't know who your CEO is. So it's challenging to give actionable advice. In general, my advice to talking with CEOs is to try to make things as objective and depersonalized as possible. And so, ways to broach the subject with an executive or CEO or manager is something like, hey, here's something I've been thinking a lot about, and that might be, I really do believe that, this is the way I would talk about it, I really do believe that companies that have folks from diverse backgrounds outcompete companies that don't. There's a ton of evidence, and I really think about that a lot personally, and I wonder if we can't do more here at this company to embrace this. Or another way. Well, actually, I'll stop there, Coco. I'll give it to you.
No, I think that's wonderful because and I talked to. So we worked with so far over 60 board opportunities in the short time that we've been around. A lot of those are open right now, and almost all of those are working with a male CEO. And they come to us predisposed, right, to want to consider a woman for the board. However, there are times occasionally when they're sort of struggling with the why. And I think Zach's advice is really good. This idea of sort of depersonalizing it, and this is what I do, is ask them to tell me a little bit about, and think, I guess this is my advice to you, not knowing which company you come from, but think a little bit about who your constituents are. You've got your internal constituents, which is the employee base, but you've also got the people who use your technology, the communities in which your technology is most valuable. So there's an ecosystem that your product serves. And if you can speak from the needs of that ecosystem, and kind of get the kind of Socratic style, right? Get the other side thinking about the question. Why do we need diversity? What is unique about our business that could benefit from diversity? And kind of make it a philosophical question to start. Usually people come to the right answer is what I find. And it's when you make it a defensive conversation that it can be challenging, because the defensive answer is, well, we can't find them and there aren't enough of them. But if you get people to a place where they're more saying, we really want this, how could we potentially create it? That's sort of my own approach, and it works really well.
Totally. I actually have two more pieces of advice on that quickly. The clincher for me. So here's my belief generally, just talking to other CEOs. Anytime I broach the subject with another CEO, they're incredibly sympathetic. They think about it a lot. They care about it. The challenge is getting them to prioritize it, because you can only prioritize a few things at once. That's just the reality of a scaling startup. So how do you get a CEO, or how do you get a company to make this one of the things that they embrace and spend real energy on, of all the things that they could spend energy on? And the thing that now I smack my forehead and go, duh. At the time was, is a realization when we hit 100 employees is, oh my God, this is only going to get harder, right? The bigger our company gets, literally the harder it will be to address this. And it was kind of like a now or never moment for me. It's like, if we don't prioritize this now, like, when are we going to prioritize it? And if it's down the road, why would I wait that long when it's going to be even harder to affect? And that really did clinch it for me, and flipped it in my head to become something to prioritize, soon. Just another thing to think about.
And
we have one more question.
Go ahead,
Coco.
Well, I think I'm seeing the same question, but go for it, Devin.
Yeah, you are. Okay. So how do you tell if leadership is authentically interested in diversity or inclusion initiatives versus just jumping on the trend?
Okay. So my belief is, when they're doing things, not to make this sort of an advertisement for Zach and OpenView, but if they are doing active things to genuinely engage in creating a more inclusive environment and bring in more diversity to the organization, then it's authentic. And what I mean by that is, if the CEO himself or herself is actively a part of what the goals need to be, understanding where the sort of the diversity challenges within the organization exist, sort of exploring why inclusion issues exist, and piggyback on that and say inclusion. Part of the reason inclusion is so important is because you can get diversity, you can get that one African American person into your community, but if you can't make that person feel included, you will not get the second and the third and the fourth and the fifth. And that's really why inclusion is really the real key. And so there's a company called BetterUp that I really like. Two guys started this company, Alexi and forgetting the other guy's name, but Eddie and Alexi. And they did exactly what Zach is talking about. They focused on diversity from the very start because they knew it was going to get harder and harder and harder. And so the engineer was African American. And one day, two of their African American engineers came up to them and they said, hey, we want to go to Afrotech. What do you think? And they said, great, go to Afrotech. We've never even heard of it. I had never heard of it. I'm not African American. But I think a genuinely curious, interested, engaged CEO and leadership is sometimes obvious. If what you see is the women leading the charge and the men staying on the sidelines, it's not as genuine. It's a going through the motions.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. I think, if you're not being authentic, you're probably bringing it up when it's appropriate or when, for some PR stunt that's going to be helpful for you. It's not sort of woven in the culture and the core of your business. So, for instance, it's certainly woven into the core and the culture of who OpenView is. Every year, OpenView as a firm and the partnership determines, okay, what are going to be the five or six key goals as a firm that we're going to focus on for this coming year. So the last 2 years, diversity has been front and center. And so everyone at the firm, everyone has sort of their individual goals that should roll up to the firm goals or sort of to your more sort of broader team-specific goals. But everyone needs to keep those core firm goals in mind and be creating actions of what they're going to do to achieve that goal. So it doesn't matter if you're one of the partners or if you're someone who is on the operations team or an executive assistant. What are you going to do to impact that goal? And the goals should be SMART, meaning they are measurable. And they're sort of quantitative versus qualitative. And so when you have our quarterly retrospective, which is really just the firm coming together every quarter to reflect on goals and performance, it's always a point of conversation. So it's not just there when it's convenient. It's an ongoing conversation. And back to my earlier point, even when it's not going well, even when you're not hitting your goal, we talk about it.
I also see companies, larger companies. Should I finish the thought, or do you want to?
Yeah, no.
Well,
go ahead.
I was just going to say there's a couple. There's increasing larger companies, Intuit, Autodesk, Microsoft being examples of these. That they're recognizing we do things for early career, we do things for mid-career, we do nothing to support women at the top of their career. And if we can create executive development programs that help those women widen their impact, get into the boardroom, become advisors, get engaged in investment communities, we will create more sustainable parity in leadership. And so they're having their top women join the Athena Alliance and get supported in development programs as well as opportunity. Again, it's all about, like, the proof is in the pudding. Don't talk about it. What are the actionable steps the company is taking?
That makes total sense. So, guys, this has been incredibly informative today. I love talking about the stats. I love hearing about, what you're doing, Zach. I applaud you for, bringing awareness to this and really taking action for your company, for Pantheon. Coco, I applaud you for obviously founding the Athena Alliance and making this your priority day in, day out to bring more diversity at the board level. Our partnership with you to date has been outstanding. You've already introduced ultimately one of our portfolio companies, Lessonly, has hired a female board member, and they're very excited to have her on board. So, again, thank you both so much. A very important topic, not just for expansion stage software companies, but for the broader business world. So, again, thank you. We're going to be sending out this deck and the recording of our conversation today in the coming days for everyone who signed up. We'll also be posting this on OpenView Labs in the coming weeks, so keep an eye out for that. If additional questions come up, don't hesitate to reach out. My email address is devin@ov.bc. We will get you answers to the questions you have or direct you to the appropriate resource, whether that be Coco, Zach, etc. And please keep an eye out for coming events that we're going to be hosting, webinars and in-person events as well. Diversity is obviously a conversation that's not going away, so I wouldn't be surprised if we have more events on this topic in the future. And you can always subscribe to receive our content on openviewlabs.com. So again, Coco and Zach, thank you so much for your time today, and best of luck with your efforts.
Thank you.
Thank you.